Welcome to everyone listening to this podcast and those of you who are joining us live via Clubhouse. A hearty welcome to Ed and Julia, but especially Ed, who's going to be taking us through or continuing to take us through the Entrepreneurial Excellence series. And 2 weeks ago, we ended off the conversation, and Ed ended off the conversation by just summing up the principles of direct sales and also posing some tough questions around the share of customer spend. And but that's as far as I'm going to take it. I'll let Ed do a recap if he wants and lead us into the rest of this conversation today. Over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Jacques. We did talk about share of customer spend, and there are two things that I want to focus on during this session. The first one is self-sabotaging behavior. Now, Jacques, between you and I, we could probably talk continuously for a week, giving anecdotes of how people have shot themselves in the foot and broken off or damaged really, really good sales relationships with customers.
Mm.
It is sadly is one of the most common things that people do. It is a really stupid thing to do, and yet we all do it. We all do it not all the time. Some of us do it worse than others. And just in the last week, I got the most amazing example of a self sabotaging behavior. Because in the last week, why I wasn't here last week, was we were in the process of moving house. And so we moved from big house we'd been in for a long time to a much smaller place in a complex. And as a result, a lot of stuff was redundant. And some people were really nice about this. Um, some people bought things from us. We gave other things to people. Um, we offered them around. People generally didn't ask. But one, which was the garden service, I won't name them, but we'd been using for many years. The garden service came to us, the owner of the garden service, and said, when you move, are you taking all of your pot plants? And we said, no, we can't possibly accommodate all of those in the new place. There'll be quite a lot that we are not taking. And why do you ask? And he said, could I have them? And we said, yes, sure. And made time to go around the garden and show him and inside and show him which plants he could have. Have, mind, not buy, have. Some of them were very mature, very elegant plants. And he was very excited, and he said he couldn't take them then because his truck was full with his workers and equipment, but he would come back the next day and collect them. And he didn't. And then as time went by, he gradually stopped returning calls or even answering calls. He had started by saying, yeah, I've had a bit of a delay. I'll come around. I'll come around. I'll come around. And then he simply rudely stopped accepting calls and terminated any conversation that we attempted to initiate. Now, he had bid for the work of the successor, the person who bought that property. There were two large projects immediately. One was felling a very large tree in quite an awkward position. So it would have been quite an expensive job. And the other was to redo the garden once extensive building alterations had been done. He was bidding for that and he was hoping for those jobs. And while this was happening, he was putting us in a very embarrassing situation because we had to leave a property with a whole lot of plants, some of them indoors, that we couldn't move. We didn't have the labor, we didn't have the strength to move them. So we had to apologize profusely to the new owner and, ask their permission to just throw these plants away. Now, as you can imagine, the new owner wanted to know why this had happened, and so we explained why this had happened. He lost the contract to fell the tree, and he certainly has no chance of uh, achieving any future work from these people. Now, how stupid! Why, if you find that you can't take those plants, why not go back and say, oops, I've made a terrible mistake. I'm afraid I cannot take those plants. Can I help you to make arrangements to give them to a garden service or to a nursery or something like that? But he simply refused to reply. Now, that is self sabotaging. That cost him quite a lot of money and an ongoing income stream
Mm.
for possibly years to come. Also, as it happens, the new owner of the house is a very, very influential family, um, very well known and very well respected, and in a position to where their recommendation carries an awful lot of weight. Now, he didn't know that, but it is likely that he has shot himself in the foot for more than just one incident. Now, how stupid. Why? And Jacques, you will have had very similar experiences. This is one happened this week, and it was very embarrassing, very awkward for me. Um, and I feel terrible about it, but it was not of my making. But you
Mm.
must have experienced many similar examples where someone deliberately, by simply not responding or doing something equally silly, makes themselves out to be completely untrustworthy in business. And how do you expect to do business if you're untrustworthy?
Mm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it is the question of once off business or repeat business, and
yeah,
understanding how those two are linked by maintaining a healthy relationship, by keeping the trust, building it further, you know.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so yes, so
And
many different examples.
and communicating.
And communicating.
That is the worst of all, in my view, where someone simply refuses to respond. And once again, you will have had, and I would have had, and most of the people listening into this would have had instances where that has happened, where something was apparently a deal and then suddenly stopped being a deal, and the other party won't talk to you at all anymore. Um, and won't reply to emails and won't reply to WhatsApps or SMSs or personal calls. So just a lack of communication. And why? What's to be feared about making a phone call or sending a message and saying, sorry, not doing this anymore? So,
Is it possible, Ed, if I might just say, is it also possible that the reason for not communicating is, well, I've lost your business anyway, so why should
yeah,
I make any special effort? And
yeah,
not understanding how networks work, you know.
yeah,
Just a
yeah.
comment.
Yeah, very much so. And especially in something like garden service, where it's very localized, where
Mm,
someone living in an area would have multiple connections with other people in the same area.
yep,
That is a very, very silly attitude to take.
absolutely.
Um, I had a similar incident. I was standing in a queue waiting to board an aircraft some time ago, and got chatting to the person next to me. And that person worked for a bank, which happened to be the bank that I use. And I was, he said, what's happening? And at the time, I was having a really tough time with him. And so I was sort of, no, I didn't want to shed a lot of tears on his shoulder, but I said, I'm having a bit of a tough time with the bank, and we're working through it this way. And he said, yes, he said, I said, no, I've been with the bank for, oh, probably something like 40 years, 50 years. Um, I would expect a reasonable amount of treatment. And his response to this, and this I found very interesting, was to say, yeah, well, you're not really the future of banking for us. I would
Wow.
be more interested in the much younger person who has a lifetime of banking ahead of them.
You're kidding.
I'm
Seriously.
absolutely serious about
Wow.
that. And I must say, I was gobsmacked. But it, it struck me at the time that that's probably quite a common attitude. A completely short sighted, completely silly attitude, but probably not an uncommon one. You're on the way out as a customer where there's not very much value left in what you do. So, therefore, you go to the bottom of the totem pile. Now, that that may be a sensible business way of doing things, but I don't see it. The people in that position, generally speaking, are influential, have an ability to tell anecdotes like this to fairly large audiences at time. And I have used that exact example in talks to um, large audiences of people and got a very, very aghast response, as happened to you. Um, but that attitude could easily be one of the reasons why people simply, yeah, you're not my customer anymore, so why should I spend any amount of time at all on you? What was puzzling in the case of the garden service is this was a gift.
Well, yeah. Difficult to figure this one out, eh?
Bit difficult, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Anyway, um, so self-sabotaging behavior is a really big one, and there are so many possibilities of doing that. One of the most common ways of self sabotaging is being defensive. So a customer raises an issue, it might be a complaint, it might be simply a notification, might be just a warning or something like that. And you become immediately defensive and tell the customer they are wrong. Now, the customer can be wrong. Customers aren't always right. Let's put that one to rest. Customers can be very, very badly wrong. But if you are a little careful and listen to the customer, often what the customer is saying to you is, I'm just telling you that something went wrong here. I'm not asking for you to apologize or repay anything or do anything like that or give me money back or replace anything or anything like that. I'm just telling you that this happened. And then you get defensive and say, no, it didn't happen. Couldn't have been from me. Must have been your fault. And once again, simple example was in a car wash. And when my car went through the car wash, a lens on one of the indicator lights was loose. So I went to the owner of the car wash and I said, just as a by the by, maybe your pressure hoses are set a bit high or something like that. Lens came loose on my car. Um, and it's fairly easy to fix, no big deal. But maybe you just want to watch that for the future. And I really got a very hard time by this garage owner. He said, no, it's not possible. This couldn't have done the damage. Must have been damaged before it got there. And no, he's not going to pay to replace the lens. And I said, I didn't ask you to pay for the lens. I just made an observation to maybe stop some future customer having a problem with you. And he went on arguing. And so I said, fine. And I stopped using that garage. I drive past it to the next one every time, and it was the most convenient filling station on my route. But I simply would not use that one. Now, my little contribution didn't make a big dent in his finances, I'm quite sure. But it was one customer that he should have had, could have had, did have, and suddenly didn't have anymore. And the more that kind of thing multiplies, the more likely you are to get into a business difficulty. And if that attitude is prevalent with one customer, it's going to be prevalent with many other customers. And so gradually you will find people falling off your customer list, and you will need to now spend more and more money replacing them with new customers. And that's just illogical. When a little bit of careful listening and responsiveness would have saved you all of those hundreds of thousands of rand you're going to spend on vastly expensive campaigns to get new customers. How silly. And yet it happens all the time, as you and I know, and as everybody listening in knows. We've all had these experiences over and over again. So to summarize, when you first of all watch your behavior, look at it, step back from your behavior, any interaction with a customer where there may be a cause for dispute, and say, does this make sense? Is this really what I should be doing? Think logically about it. Do not, as the banker did, simply rush off a glib answer, a very uh, on the surface answer with very little depth involved in it, very shallow thinking. Um, Watch for what your customer may be thinking about your response. Now, I'm not suggesting that you treat all customers as right all the time. That is definitely not the case. Um, Most people who've been in business for a while will have at some stage told a customer, probably quite a few, that they no longer um, would be supplied by your organization. So customers don't have to be right. You don't have to love all customers. You don't have to treat them all with awe and beg for their business. That's not the case. But just don't lose money stupidly. Let's move on a little bit to listening. We haven't got too much time left, but let's start this topic at least. Active listening is the art of listening and absorbing and showing that you are listening, indicating that you are listening. It's taught by, for instance, for counselors are taught active listening, where they are taught to listen, absorb, understand both the sense and the meaning, and from time to time reinterpret what has been said to make sure that they have the correct meaning. So if you, for instance, Jacques, are listening to me speaking on Clubhouse here, we have four areas where the communication can go badly wrong. The first area is that I might not say exactly what I am thinking. So I might have one thought and phrase that slightly differently, especially if I'm speaking in a language not my home language. So that's the first block, that I might not, the words that come out might not, in fact, be the meaning of what I wanted to convey. So that's the first step. The second step is that there may be some kind of interference between speaking and hearing. So they on Clubhouse, fortunately, we have very clear signal. We have very good acoustics, and generally speaking, that's not a problem. It is a problem on, for instance, many phone calls, conversations in noisy places, people with hearing disabilities, and a whole lot of other possibilities. So interference between what is said and what is heard. And then the third possibility, I'm sorry, is interpreting. So what you, Jacques, hear, you interpret in your mind and assign a meaning to it. Now, there can be quite a big gap between what I meant to say and what you interpreted, what you heard of what I did actually say. And, you know, probably at school we played these bush telegraph games where everyone repeated a message down the line until it became garbage, until it became unintelligible entirely. That's just a game effect of the same happening. But there are various studies around which show that spoken word and written word, and even the combination of written and spoken word simultaneously, is not the most effective communication mechanism in the world. Um, that only a percentage of what is said is actually understood. I'm not quite sure of what the percentage is. We can maybe look that up for next week and have a bit of a chat about that. But one of the tests that you can give yourself is to tune in to a news broadcast and listen to it on your cell phone or TV or wherever you listen to news broadcasts, if you listen to news broadcasts. But if you don't, just try. Find a news broadcast, listen into it, and let's say the news broadcast is, I don't know, 20 minutes long, excluding all the adverts or something like that. So listen to it. Television would give better communication than radio because television gives you visuals, supportive visuals as well. So try and see if you can find a radio broadcast. Doesn't have to be a long one. Even 5 to 10 minutes is perfectly good. Listen intently to it. You can perhaps record it. Listen intently to it. Do not listen to the recording. And then write down as many facts as you remember from that news bulletin. Then go back and listen to the recording and see A, whether you got your facts right, and B, how many of them you got right. Now, you will find that you will remember a whole lot of irrelevant information from the bulletin. Dates, for instance, times, for instance, places, for instance, perhaps names, but not necessarily the context of the information. So, this is an exercise that I do and have done many times, is to record a news broadcast, play it with perfect acoustics, with people concentrating like they have never concentrated before, and then ask 20 questions about that. And it's only a 6 minute news broadcast. Ask 20 questions about that. The average response to that is 4 right. The record is 8 right out of 20. We are very, very inefficient listening machines. And how do you sell if you can't listen? You can be trained, you can train yourself to listen much more effectively. But recognize up front that however good you think you are, you're probably not. It's a pity we couldn't play that sort of exercise online. Maybe one day we will play that sort of exercise online and just see how well people score on that. I've run it many, many times. As I say, the average is 4 out of 20 correct answers. The record so far is 8 out of 20 correct answers. Scary number, huh?
Absolutely.
And bear in mind, that is where you're listening intently, where there's no interference, where the person speaking speaks very well and very clearly, and the words are chosen very carefully by the scriptwriters. So there's very little of the normal day to day interference in conversations. We're not good listening machines. Next week, we'll talk about what we can do about that, how we can become better at listening, and what the consequences can be of really bad listening. But I think I've just about talked out our time now, Jacques.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, you're teasing us with this. But it's quite interesting as far as active listening is concerned, and just harnessing the auditory component, just your ears alone, and not the rest of your senses to make meaning and to understand what is being said. Um, but yeah, it's scary. it's something that you cannot take for granted. Active
Yeah.
listening, and I mean, depending on in a selling context, I mean, it's quite interesting that one would in the different disciplines of counseling, mentoring, coaching, consulting, we know that active listening is key. But in selling, to raise that awareness that this is a critical component to actually close that sale is to listen intently so that you can actually um, promise and deliver uh, to what the client actually wants. You know, I can only imagine that if you then understand the true nature of the need or the problem that needs to be solved, um, then making an effort and learning and practicing in this area is a great reminder, Ed.
Mm. Mm.
Um,
Vital skill.
specifically in the context. Yes, yes, absolutely.
Absolutely vital skill, and a very under rated one. People don't. I've never been on a sales school where people teach salespeople to listen. Strangely enough, I've never seen a sales course that focuses on this as one of the core skills, but it is. It's far more important than any other sales skill.
Mm, mm. Oh no, I can fully appreciate that. Well, wonderful, Ed. That we certainly looking forward then to the sequel next week. So thank you
Look
very
forward to it.
much. Thank you for everyone that's joined us this afternoon. Enjoy the rest of the day, and until we chat again next week. Cheers, Ed.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.